Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it's the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, we've got a fantastic show lined up for you yet again here on the MOA, the Make It Out Alive broadcast. This is episode 43 of the MOA broadcast, broadcasting to you from the hills of Oregon, the high desert, if you will, at 4,200 feet. And we got a great show, some highlights of the show today. Cowboy coffee in the fall weather. That's a good one. We'll get to that in just a moment, but that's one of those skills that every man or woman, whatever, should be able to do, is to make a good pot of cowboy coffee. A hiker rescue gone wrong. Apple AirTags lead to an armed ambush in, you guessed it, Florida. And a bloody burger beatdown gone wrong. All coming straight at you today on the MOA broadcast. All right, folks, thanks for joining us. We've got a great show lined up. Let me get a quick sip here. Been a long day. My voice has taken a bit of a beating. Okay. So I mentioned this in the last episode. We are in the fall weather now. If you've never been in the high desert before, I've talked about this a number of times on the show. It is a very unique little ecosystem, the high desert is. And again, I've mentioned this aspect a number of times, but for those of you that have just joined us, we've had a number of subscribers join up here recently. The high desert is very different than what you might think. And the easiest way I can think of to explain it or to illustrate it is when you watch a lot of the old westerns and cowboy movies, you'll see these guys going around. They're in the high desert, the sun and sand everywhere, and it looks kind of, the landscape is kind of bleak. But what you see is they're all wearing like heavy coats. They're wearing gloves and scarves and all this kind of stuff. And the reason is, even in the high desert, even during the daytime, now during the middle of summer, it doesn't get too cool at night. But even during the middle of summer, when it's 95, 100 sometimes, or a little over 100, we don't usually get a lot of extended times over 100 degrees. We'll have a couple of weeks of really hot weather usually, and then the rest is 80s and 90s for the most part. But what will happen is, even when it gets up to 100 or more during the daytime, it'll still easily drop down to the 40s or 50s at night, and that's quite the temperature swing. And especially, obviously it's a movie, but if you're in a cowboy movie type setting, if you're out there on a horse or you're backpacking, camping, hiking, whatever, you're going to need to be prepared for that temperature swing. And today is an excellent example of that. We're in October right now, still the first third of fall, give or take, of autumn. And it was 81 today during the day, the hottest part of the day. 2 thermometers I measured that on, and they both got 81. And that was in the shade, or out of the sunlight anyway. And at nighttime, it's not even the dead of night, the middle of the night yet, early morning, and we're already down to 34, I think it was 33 degrees as I last checked it on the thermometer. So, that's a big swing. You're looking at over 50 degrees of swing once that's, or difference, disparity, once we get to the middle of the night, where I'm sure it'll drop below freezing. Last night it got below 31, I think. So, that's a big swing. And that's one of the interesting things about the high desert here. So we're in the middle of fall, which is my favorite season here at the high desert, and wanted to talk briefly about cowboy coffee. I try and incorporate a little bit about coffee each episode because it's something I really enjoy. And it's there's a lot of lore behind coffee. We're going to go into the original way cowboys made coffee going back 100 or more years ago, well over 100 years ago, actually 150 years or so. And I won't spoil it now, but it's an interesting little segment about how they used to prepare and preserve the beans for the coffee beans for being on the trail and just being out for extended periods of time and not spoiling, going bad, not really spoiling, but they're going to go stale or lose some of their flavor and strength and so forth. There is a case to be made, if you do a lot of reading on history, that cowboys had some of the absolute best coffee and steaks that you can imagine. So in some cases, cowboys ate very, very well, and they drank very, very good coffee. So interesting. We'll get to that another time. But briefly going into cowboy coffee, why is this important? Guys, if you're going to be a man, and ladies, don't take any offense, whatever, I don't really care. This is a skill. I'm not a big fan of this is your man card. You should be able to do this, that, and the other. But this is a skill that I think any and all men should be able to do, and that is to make a good pot of cowboy coffee, especially whether it's a power outage, or you're camping, you're backpacking, hiking, whatever. If you are, let's say you guys are going camping, whether it's glamping, where you have all the accessories and the RVs and everything, or you're doing it the old-fashioned way with tents or in the back of your car or truck or whatever at a campsite, if you are the guy that can produce a delicious pot of cowboy coffee, trust me, people will be lining up and you will earn it's just like being able to make a good fire. I've been on a number of different camping trips and other events, bonfires and so forth, where some of the guys, usually from the city, no offense, city boys, but where they can't even start a fire. I've been at a couple of different places where they were going to have a bonfire, whether at the beach or at someone's home or whatever, and they had gasoline and lighters and all this stuff, and they couldn't get a fire going. Guys, if that doesn't affect your very manhood, I don't know what does. That is something that I don't care about the sexism, whatever, call it whatever you want. I don't care. There are certain things that men should be able to bring to the table. And even if it's something that's only used once every 5 years or necessary every 5 years or so, a man should be able to start a fire. A man should be able to make a pot of cowboy coffee. So let's get to it very quickly. This is real simple. You can watch a lot of videos and other stuff on this on the YouTubes and other places, and they're gonna talk about adding salt, eggshells, a cold water splash, all this other stuff. You can do all of that, but you don't need any of it. All you need is I take a percolator that I've taken the guts out of, one of those enamel, like the blue and white speckled ones, the enamelware. I like that, so that you don't want the double-walled stainless type stuff, because you can't really put that directly on the fire. It's not going to work properly. You're going to want something you can put on the stove or the griddle or the fire or the grill, and be able to make it. So single wall is what you want. Enamel is fine, but get whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. You can do plain aluminum or titanium, stainless steel, but single wall is going to be the important part of it. All you got to do, it's going to take a little trial and error to get your mixture proportions down right, but you're going to add your water first, okay? And then I will go ahead, and you can do it both ways. I will typically go ahead and add the coffee grounds to the cold water and then just bring it up to where it starts to kind of boil. Some guys will tell you to add the coffee grounds once it starts to boil. It really doesn't make a huge difference. I've done both ways, and I'm fine with either way, but I'll typically go ahead and just add the grounds when the water is cold, and that way it kind of comes up to temp with the cold water, but it doesn't matter. What you don't want to do is, and if you do get it to boiling first and then add your grounds, that's fine. But what you don't want to do is sit there and boil it for an extended period of time with the grounds in there, because it's going to taste like an ashtray, like the way the old percolator coffee used to taste when people made it with percolators very commonly in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so forth, even 80s. And the problem with percolators, the percolator can make a really good cup of coffee, but most people over-perk it. They sit there and they over-extract the coffee, and they let the water boil through it over and over and over again to where it tastes like a bucket. Well, we got to keep this radio friendly. It tastes like a butt. Okay, it can be a cigarette butt or any other kind of butt you want to figure in there, but it doesn't taste very good, and it's not sharp and doesn't have that clean flavor profile that it does if you would stop the perking after it reaches that desired extraction level. So anyway, what you don't want to do is, again, sit there and let it just boil and boil and boil. That isn't necessary. What I will do is I'll add the grounds and the water, and I'll put it on the coals, not on the flame, on coals. You don't cook on flames, you cook on coals, until it just starts to kind of bubble, and not a full rolling boil, but it's just starting to bubble. And then I'll take it off and give it about 3 to 5 minutes. I prefer a deeper extraction and a deeper flavor of the coffee, so I will go ahead and let it sit there for about 5 minutes next to the coal, so that it doesn't get cold or lose temperature too rapidly, because it's a single-walled, percolator or whatever you want to put in there, jug. Then, after about the 5 minutes, I will actually put it back on the coals for a minute until it gets just before it starts to bubble again, and boom. Then I'll take it off and let it sit for about 1 or 2 minutes, and in that time, the coffee grounds will settle, and you're ready to go. Now, there are all kinds of things people say if you put in eggshells, if you put in salt, some of it brings down the bitterness, it brings out that and so forth, or a cold water splash at the end to kind of settle the grounds. None of that is really necessary. You can even skip the second setting on the coals. And after it's been 5 minutes or so, I will usually give it a stir and then let it sit another 2 or 3 minutes to kind of distribute the flavor and the oils that are in the coffee bean. But you don't have to do that. And that's one of the key differences between this and like whenever you use a paper filter to brew coffee. The paper filter a lot of times robs you of that oil that is in that coffee bean that gives it a richer flavor. And that's one of the things you can see this whenever you do a French press. There is oil in that coffee bean that stays in there because of the fine metal mesh filter on a French press. Cowboy coffee and French press coffee are essentially the same. There's just no filter. And if you let it sit for that 3 to 5 minutes or so, and then you gently pour it, you're not going to have any grit or any sediment much heavier than a French press until you get down to the very bottom of that pot of coffee. So that's how I do it. You do it how you want, and whatever. There you go. Okay, one last thing I wanted to talk about. Wanted to talk about this. It's chili time here in the high, as we get in the high desert. We get into the winter time. But I have been using my rotisserie instead. I haven't been doing much in the way of chili. Just haven't had the time to lay out all the ingredients. But this is an old rotisserie machine that I got from Macy's in New York City, back when Macy's was a massive deal. I have no idea what Macy's is like now, but Macy's used to be just an amazing store. There used to be one, I don't remember where it was somewhere downtown in Manhattan, and they had it was like 5 stories. It was huge. And they even had like this deli, or a cafe, really not a deli, a cafe in the basement, or one of the lower floors. And you would go there. It was so neat because it was just like it used to be 30, 40 years ago. You would get a tray and you would go along the line. You could get your lunch or your dinner. They had like soups and a few other dishes, some pasta, and like some meat dishes and so forth. And you would kind of load your tray. And when you got to the end, you would check out and pay for whatever you got. And it was like an old deli style or cafe style lunch. Anyway, long story short, I bought this George Foreman rotisserie, very similar to like the Ronco, the Mr. Popeil rotisserie machine, home rotisserie machine. Remember the set it and forget it guy, the same guy who did the Pocket Fisherman and so many other things, Ron Popeil. Well, this was the George Foreman version. And this was the neatest thing because I was very young and very broke at the time, and I had friends over once in a while, once or twice a month or every other month, whatever it was, would do this. Get the rotisserie machine out, and I would put a 5 or 6 pound chicken, whatever, on there and cook this thing over the rotisserie, season it up, and let this thing cook. And it had this removable tray at the bottom for the fat to drain off. And some of you are going to find this disgusting, and some of you are going to find it absolutely amazing, which is what it was. When that chicken was basically all done or almost done, we would go ahead and take out, when it got up to the right temperature, kill the rotisserie part of it so it would stop spinning and cooking and just sit there and kind of rest. And you would pull that tray out, and there would just be, it was like a small vat of rendered fat with all the seasoning and the fat and the grease that had dripped off of this chicken while it was cooking for an hour, hour and a half, whatever it was, depending on the size, into this tray. And what we would do is we would go all kinds of fresh bakeries and breads to be bought in New York City. We would get either a French or an Italian loaf of bread cut into chunks, and everybody would take this chunk of Italian or French bread and dip it into that yellow, we called it liquid gold. It was so good. It was nice and salty and fatty, delicious. When you're 20, 25 years old, there is no way, if you work an active job and you work out and you're a very active person, at that age, you cannot possibly eat enough food to fill you up. And so before we had the chicken, we would sit there and take turns dipping this bread into this liquid gold, this liquid rendered fat. It was so good. All the seasoning had kind of run off with it, along with the lemon juice and the butter to kind of tenderize and season the chicken. And it was so good. We call it liquid gold. It was amazing. I don't care if you think that's ridiculous, if you think it's gross. It was amazing. I had a good time. And it was one of my fond memories of my youth, and it tasted absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to tell you, I still do it occasionally whenever I cook a chicken. Or what's almost as good, or just as good, is Cornish game hens. If you get one of these rotisserie machines, mine's going on it's going on 30 years old, and it still works just fine. It's survived countless moves all across the United States, literally coast to coast. And the old George Foreman rotisserie, I don't even know if they still make them or not anymore, but it is still going. But Cornish game hens are fantastic too. They're like a miniature chicken. They're absolutely delicious. So, okay, last thing. I had a listener email. I'm not going to read the email. It was just very simple. But they wanted to know about pepper spray. We talked about in the last episode, I believe, where Bacon and I were attacked by dogs again here on the reservation that we live on, or very near. They call them res dogs out here, just packs of stray dogs that run loose in the Indian reservation. And it was about pepper spray. Now, I don't think we have any restrictions in Oregon. I have to double check. But if you are in California, make sure you're careful because they do have some restrictions on size for pepper spray. I believe it's a 2.5 ounce. Don't quote me. Do your own research. There's a 2.5 ounce size restriction, which is like the normal size can you would get at a sporting goods store or Amazon or wherever you're going to get your pepper spray from. Two things to remember about pepper spray, guys. Number one, I get some emails from like the gun bros, like, why don't you just shoot them? And I mean, literally, I've got a number of emails from guys that like that when these dogs have attacked Bacon and me, my dog, while we're on dog walks. Excuse me. Here's the thing to remember about that. Number one, a shooting is a much more, I hate to use the word violent, although technically it is. It's a much more violent, much more visceral situation when someone discharges a firearm. Now, where I live, there are no police for over 30 miles away. And frankly, there's an excellent chance even if someone called them, they're not going to show up because it's county sheriffs. And I've had that experience multiple times myself. But here's my thoughts on this. You do whatever you believe is best. I'm not going to give someone advice on self-defense, whether it's human or animal. By the time you pull out a firearm and you end something's life, whether it's a dog or a human, you have now escalated things in a very, very big way. Now, they escalated it first. I get that. By putting themselves in your life and in your situation. And, you got to do what you got to do. You make that decision yourself. For me, doing something like using a firearm is going to be an absolute, I don't really like that idea. I don't want to do it. It's a last resort type situation for, dogs or, whatever else. Because you have now changed things in an unchangeable way. When you take something's life, whether it's human or animal, things have changed. And you're going to have legal issues to deal with. There are going to be a number of things. The beautiful thing about pepper spray, and pepper spray is very effective in many, many situations, if not most. When it's all said and done, everybody goes their way, everybody's alive, and nobody is really seriously, irreparably harmed or hurt. Now, again, make your own decision, but unless it's absolutely necessary, taking something's life, and again, you make your own choice on that, whether it bothers you or not, taking something's life it's an irreparable or irrevocable decision. You can't go back and change that decision. Okay, once it's done, it's done. Pepper spray, which is very, very effective, 15, 30, 40 minutes later, or next day, whatever, it's all over with. It's like it never happened. And everybody's still alive, and charges are much lower and less significant. And, everything is just much more copacetic, if you will. So give that some thought. Make the right choice for you. Meditate on that and think about what's going to be the best decision for you and your family or your animals or whatever. That being said, if you choose to use pepper spray, and I'm a big fan of it, it is very effective in most cases. There are some people and animals that it doesn't seem to faze very much, but the vast majority of people that I have ever seen and animals that I've ever seen sprayed with pepper spray, they do not like it at all. So it's been very effective in my experience. The important thing to remember is once you use it, give yourself some time. It isn't always, most of the time, it's not an immediate effect. Frequently, you want to give yourself a minimum of 15 to 30 or 40 seconds for that pepper spray to kick in. So whether it's an animal or a human, if you deploy the pepper spray, get it in the mucous membranes, the face, eyes, nose, mouth area, and then what you want to do is create distance. Back up, retreat, whatever it is, but create distance between you and whatever you just sprayed with pepper spray, and give that spray, after you give them the sauce, give it some time to marinate. Let it soak in and start doing its thing. Because what's going to happen in most cases, you're going to find after you deploy the pepper spray and use it, if you do it properly, for most people, after 15, 20, 30 seconds, they are not going to want anything to do. It's going to take the fight right out of them. They are not going to want anything to do with you or a further altercation. And I've had to spray a number of dogs out here while I'm walking my dog. I mean, we've been literally attacked and bloodied. I've got ripped clothes, and so does Bacon. His sweaters and coats have been torn up by these dogs. within 10 to 15 seconds or less, they do not want anything to do with you. So it's a very effective method to deal with some of these things in a lot of cases. Not every single case, but again, some experience and a little bit of preparation are going to make the decision. You can make the decision that works best for you. But don't think it's going to be an immediate thing. Some people are very sensitive, or animals are very sensitive to it, but most, give yourself that 10, 15 to 30 seconds. And once that sauce starts to kind of kick in and marinate, they suddenly lose the desire to have any further altercation with you. So there we go. Let me get a sip and then move on to our next story. I am not a sports fan. I don't really follow any sports. I never really have. I grew up with my dad watching some sports, but it never really appealed to me to spend hours upon hours watching it, days on end. But I saw this story by now. I was going to record this episode originally yesterday, but by now, Wednesday morning, whenever you guys get this, probably you'll have heard this. Doug Martin, a former All-Pro running back with the NFL and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, died while in police custody early Saturday morning. The Oakland Police Department, OPD, confirmed after multiple outlets first reported the news. The former NFL running back and Boise State standout was 36 years old. I thought this was a sad story. Again, I didn't know who he was, but 36 years of age. If you read the story, it's still developing. There's a lot of news coming out, but it appears as though he was having some struggles with mental health. His family had been very open about this, and people that knew him had been very open about this. I mean, a young guy, 36 years old, man, that's still a kid. You've got literally a lifetime of adulthood ahead of you at that point. And this fellow, I don't know exactly what went down, but according to various reports, it appears as though he was having some sort of mental health struggle, and he left his house and went down the street and was in the process of somehow either breaking into or entering one of his neighbors' homes down the street. And it just went downhill from there. And then some articles stated, there's some sources stated that he had a heart attack. The cops showed up, they subdued him, and then he either had a heart attack in their custody or something like that. That's what the sources have said. I don't know. There hasn't been an official cause of death released. But I just thought it was a sad story, and just thought I'd throw that in there real quickly. 36 years old, man. That's nothing. If you're in your 30s at all, you're starting to realize at this point that 30s are nothing. You've got a lot of years ahead of you, and that is very, very young. And it also made me think of the bizarre obsession we have with sports here in the United States or around the world. I don't know. I don't get this. Like I said, I grew up watching some sports with my dad. Growing up near St. Louis, Missouri, we watched, of course, the Redbirds, the St. Louis Cardinals, and I believe that was the baseball, and I believe that it was the Cardinals for the football team at the time, too. At some point, they went to Arizona. I don't know. I didn't follow it real closely. Only been to a handful of football games, maybe 2 or 3 that I can recall. Went to more baseball games. That was during the steroid era, if you will, when McGuire was just smashing them out of the park. That was a lot of fun. I can say I attended a number of those games. But we had the St. Louis Blues, which was a great franchise. I don't know what any of this stuff is like now. I don't follow it, but to me, it's bizarre, the obsession that we have with some sports. I've worked at various points in my life around a number of different guys. And some of these guys would watch all these sport games all day long, sports ball of whatever the flavor, basketball, baseball, football, whatever, soccer, football. And then they would watch the show. They would watch a pregame show, then the sporting event itself, then a post-game show. And then they would listen to all their commentators on Twitter and X and social media talk about the game. And then at work the next day, they would talk about these games nonstop. And I've always thought to myself, don't take this personally, folks. I've always thought to myself, think of all of the things you could have learned or done, even if it was for a fun, an entertainment endeavor, accomplished in the hundreds of hours a year that you devoted to sports and sports ball of whatever the flavor may be, of these other dudes running around playing games. And these guys are getting paid millions of dollars to play a child game. So I don't know. To me, I don't get it. I mean, think of it. You could have learned a language or two. You could have picked up other skills, other trades, and done who knows what. So there you go. That's a personal thought. I don't try and stick my personal opinion in too often, but I've always thought that was strange. The bizarre obsession we have makes me think of the bread and circuses. If you don't know what that is, type that into a search engine, look it up, Rome, bread and circus, and see what you come up with. You may find it Rather interesting. Okay, let's move on. We go to the great state of California. Or excuse me, a man from California. This comes to us from the Santa Fe, New Mexico. A California man charged with trespassing after Rio Grande Gorge Bridge rescue. A man rescued from the Rio Grande Gorge last week after sheriff's deputies say he became trapped for hours under a ledge while hiking faces a charge of criminal trespassing. Casey Waldman, 54, of Huntington Beach, California, had climbed into the gorge to look for a hot spring, Taos County Sheriff Steve Miera said. But he couldn't climb back out, straining himself roughly 150 feet beneath the ledge. He was allegedly, Waldman, this is the California dude who got lost or stuck, was allegedly, quote, cursing and irate with deputies and the person who reported the incident. Miera alleged. Deputies later charged Waldman with criminal trespassing, accusing him of illegally climbing into the gorge, which is part of the Rio Grande Gorge National Monument. This was an unnecessary and avoidable expenditure of county and town resources, Miera said in a statement. I'm not going to go and read the whole story. They rescued him. It was a technical thing. They had to get all his crap involved. Yada, yada, yada. The point of this is, number one, on the MOA broadcast, we talk about stuff in the outdoors quite frequently. This guy clearly made, some suboptimal choices that led to him having to be rescued by Taos County Fire and Rescue, the Sheriff's Office, Fire Department, and the Rio, whatever, some other Grande Gorge rescue deal. This has been kind of a debate that we've covered in a number of episodes here on the MOA broadcast is should people be on the hook financially, and what are the criteria to be on the hook financially for a rescue operation? And that's one of the things we try and stress is make sure you're prepared. We're going to kind of keep moving on this episode because we've got a couple of things I want to hit. But, that's something that we've talked about. Okay, you should be at the bare minimum letting one or two people know where you're going to be going, how long, and when to expect you back. And this can be done with a copy and paste text message that you send both people, and then you drop a pin once you arrive at your location. This is not difficult to do. You can also do this with the police station or the forestry service or whatever else office very easily in many cases and cover all of your bases at once. Then you need to make sure you have at least the bare minimum of supplies that would allow you to be out for as long as you want to be, plus some emergency buffer. And those seem to be the primary criteria that come into play when people they come under fire and they need to be rescued. And then these government institutions decide whether or not you get charged for a rescue. Now, this guy was charged criminally with criminal trespass. We're talking about the actual bill, though, because some people get a bill for the actual cost of the rescue, which in some cases can easily be between $20,000 and $50,000 to $100,000 or more once helicopters and rescue teams and technical stuff starts getting involved. So just something to think about. They said in the article here, the sheriff or whoever it was, the spokesman, said he got exhausted and started to panic because he knew when he looked up how far down he was and knew he wasn't able to get out of there. So just something to think about. Make sure you're prepared, because a lot of times that's the deciding factor over whether or not they charge you both criminally and or financially for these rescue situations. If they deem and decide that you have not prepared yourself and you were, being somewhat reckless, then the pendulum may not swing in your favor. So keep that in mind. Where are we at on time? I may have to do this segment. Let's go ahead and make this a 35 minute episode. We are going to dig into two other things on this episode, axes and chopping implements and instruments while in the backwoods. And we're going to dig more into the, where are we at? Let's go ahead and cover that story. We'll save both of those for next time. We're going to talk, forget it. Let's jump in. I got a number of emails over the high intensity training stuff, HIT, and we're going to jump into that, and we'll save the story about the air tags or AirPods. What do they call? I don't have an Apple device anymore. Air tags in Florida and the violent armed ambush that a couple faced with the AirTags deal in Florida, and the situational awareness segment that goes with it. And we'll jump into the HIT training. Okay, so we've talked about this a number of times. To keep you up, to bring you up to speed, there are a number of different types or methodologies for working out. There is the volume approach, which is whatever. Guys, whatever you want to do, let me make this clear from the jump. Whatever you want to do, you do that. If it makes you happy, if you enjoy it, and it works for you, then do it. When it comes to working out, if you like the volume approach, doing 3, 4, 5 or more sets of, 5, 10, 15, whatever reps per exercise and set per body part, sometimes 3 to 5 different, exercises per body part. It's called the volume approach, typically. If that works for you, do it. I don't care. I really don't. And I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean that whatever makes you happy, do that. And if it works for you, then great. If you want to optimize your result and spend the least amount of time and have the most amount of results and success in the gym for the purposes of getting in better both strength and size and cardiovascular strength and condition, then the HIT, high intensity training, it's not really HIT training, it's high intensity training. If you say HIT training, it's kind of a double positive, but whatever. Doing HIT style, high intensity training can be very, very effective. In brief, you're going to go for more big compound exercises, things like squat, deadlift, dips, chins, straight barbell curl, and so forth to hit the large muscle groups in the beginning. And once you get your physique built and pack on a couple of pounds of muscle and you want to start refining it, that's fine. Then you can do for some more detailed movements. But in the beginning, you're going to find few things affect growth and trigger that growth mechanism, like squats, deadlifts. Stiff-legged deadlifts are great too. If you know how to safely do those, do your own research. And of course, here's the legal disclaimer: consult your physician before beginning any fitness program or weightlifting routine. But stiff-legged deadlifts can be very effective done properly. And then, of course, things like dips and chins. Weighted dips and chins are fantastic. Tremendous exercise dips and chins are when done properly. And, of course, straight bar, barbell curls, and so forth. Now, the primary thing behind this, how the high-intensity training works, is the basis of the one set to failure. What does that mean? Briefly, you're doing one clean set, going cleanly and safely to failure. Failure simply means you don't got to be flinging the weight. You don't got to be using body English to get it up there and getting dirty and nasty with it. When you can no longer complete your repetitions in good, clean, safe form, you have truly gone to failure. Now, we've mentioned before, the more acquainted you become with both your body and the style of working out, the definition of failure will kind of change, because you'll learn how to dig deeper and ignore that massive level of discomfort and pain that comes along with doing it. However, the benefits are this: a typical full body workout takes between 10 and 15 to 20 minutes, and you do that 2 to 3 times a week, and I promise you, if you do it properly, you will experience more growth, especially if you don't use special vitamins to aid your recovery. And by special vitamins, I mean steroids. If you're not juicing or on the gear, you will still notice fantastic growth as long as your genetic potential allows for it, and you will do it in a fraction of the time of the guy spending hours per day or week in there working out. And here's the interesting thing: the stronger you get, the less frequently you have to work out. When you start getting really strong, you'll go down to 2 times a week or once every 3 or 4 to 5 days for a workout, and you will still see growth, and you will be as strong and as fit as you've ever been if you do it properly. The other interesting thing is I tend to combine this with circuit training type of philosophy, and that's the way it was done, originally when they had the Nautilus machines and so forth. The idea behind circuit training being that instead of taking the very popular 3 or 4 minutes or more rest between sets, you take the minimal amount of rest necessary, meaning a minute to 30 seconds or less. Once you get truly in shape, you will be able to go from exercise to exercise with literally no rest at all. And think about the cardiovascular benefits of that. When you can do 5 to 8 or even 10 exercises for your whole body, going to failure every 30 to 60 or 75 seconds or so, without rest or without stopping for a total of 15 to 20 minutes, you will be, I promise you, in phenomenal muscular and cardiovascular condition. So, we'll dig into that some more. If you have any questions or emails, let us know. We'll continue this series on HIT or high-intensity training. Send that email to info@gearconvoy.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you and or incorporate those ideas and emails into the show. But it's an absolutely fascinating and effective and efficacious way to work out. Okay, let me have a sip, folks, and then we'll go to our final story for the day. Okay, where are we at? We go to... For today's final story, we don't go to Florida as usual. We're going to Texas. Order mix-up sparks a bloody 7-person brawl inside a Texas Whataburger beatdown. This article comes to us via the New York Post. I'll use their opening line because they have a way with words. A beef over a food order mix-up sparked a vicious 7-person brawl inside a Texas Whataburger last week, according to reports and authorities. People were dispatched to the San Antonio, Texas Whataburger just after 3 a.m. last Sunday in response to the wild melee, the San Antonio Police Department told KSAT. After cops arrived, they learned an order mix-up caused the fight to erupt among 2 groups of patrons, authorities said. A viral video, there were actually several, I did some research and pulled some quotes, you're going to love this. A viral video posted to social media captured separate fights breaking out, where individuals were seen pummeling and kicking others to the floor, Mortal Kombat style. Pictures of the aftermath, and they show blood covering the booths and floor of the fast food chain. Somebody got cracked open because if you look at the images of this online, there are puddles of blood. They probably had to close that store at least overnight and maybe the next day, I would imagine, to get the hazmat and decon teams in there because there was human blood everywhere. So what was the cause of all this? One of the participants' mother, her name was Rebecca Noel, posted on Facebook alongside a video of the fight that, according to her, quote, part of another table's order was mistakenly brought to my son and his friends. Instead of the staff acknowledging their error, they reportedly told the other customers, they have your food. So I guess the patrons took it upon themselves to reclaim their order. Now keep in mind, this is all a giant beatdown over cheeseburgers at 3 a.m. I don't know, was this really necessary? According to various posts on social media, the fight escalated when the issue escalated past a verbal interaction and became physical. What the is wrong with y'all? I don't give a... Just give me my food before I shove my foot up your... You... Give me my burger. You want a burger and fries? How about my foot up your... Things then got physical. After they were unable to resolve the conflict verbally, things went downhill. However, no major injuries were reported despite the chaos, police added. The investigation into the incident remains ongoing. All right, survivors, that's going to do it for today's show. Remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.